Yesterday, Destiny content creators got to ask two of the Bungie sandbox designers their most burning questions in a podcast, and this video will highlight some of the most important parts and summarize my thoughts on the topics. Many of you know Bungie's weekly This Week at Bungie article called The TWAB, and the amount of insight that we gained from this interview was basically like 50 TWABs combined. In my opinion, this is perhaps the best interaction that the Destiny community has had with the developers because the creators asked really insightful questions that you, the Destiny player, actually care about, and we got some great answers. We finally got some insight into the development process and things like why they created Stasis, Bungie's vision for the future of weapon, ability, and subclass balance, and brand new information about how certain perks and stats affect your gameplay. There were also some kinda controversial topics that I found interesting, including nerfing movement tech like Stompies and Icarus Dash, potentially removing the quick draw glitch, nerfing special weapons, and more. Now, of course, you can go watch the full 3-hour podcast if you want to catch every single detail. This video just covers the most essential parts in my view and my opinions and commentary on the sandbox. I know there's this meme about how Bungie doesn't play their game or understand what the players want, but after listening to this talk, it's pretty obvious to me that they are in touch with the community and the game. As a general statement, I feel like Bungie tends to not communicate a lot of their future plans and ideas to us, so that's why I thought this podcast was incredibly insightful and reassuring. It's amazing to get some transparency about what the developers are thinking right now and what changes we may see soon. At the beginning of the podcast, we heard mostly from Kevin Yanis, Bungie's sandbox discipline lead. He talked a lot about what went on behind the scenes during the development of Stasis and its subsequent tuning, which just happens to go into effect the day that I upload this video. According to Kevin, Stasis started out as a PvE fantasy that would empower newer players to make relevant contributions in things like Grandmasters, even if they weren't able to dish out as much damage as veteran players. Bungie also wanted to introduce a subclass and damage type that wasn't focused solely on damage. With the exception of Bubble and Well of Radiance, every subclass at the time was just focused on dishing out maximum damage, so Stasis and its crowd control abilities were meant to provide another method of dealing with enemies, especially for things like Champions and Grandmaster Nightfalls. I feel like this is overall a pretty cool idea. Personally, I think Stasis is actually kinda interesting in PvE, and it does fit nicely into the sandbox. Now, obviously PvP is another story. With the development of PvP Stasis, Kevin said that the team kept coming back to the question of, why would you freeze someone when you could just one-shot them with something like a throwing knife, handheld supernova, or grenade instead? Over time, that led to them continually increasing the potency of PvP Stasis prior to launch. During early development, freezing in PvP gave you a shield and weapons didn't do much damage to you, so it was essentially like pausing the game and you'd usually survive. I'm super curious how Stasis would have played if it shipped in that state. It certainly wouldn't have been as OP, but I feel like aspects, fragments, and associated stat bonuses still would have made it viable. The next part is about abilities, their quite dominant role in PvP, and Bungie's vision for the future of ability tuning. Kevin made it clear that the goal of the sandbox team is to shift Destiny PvP away from ability spam and more towards gunplay. When it's at its best, Destiny gunplay is incredibly rewarding and fun, so the idea that we're gonna have a sandbox which focuses on gunplay is really enticing. He also clarified that some abilities will still one-shot, but only ones that require a significant amount of skill in order to properly execute. In my view, the biggest problem with Stasis is that you could hand your controller to your grandma and she'd be just as good as you at throwing a cold snap grenade. There simply isn't any skill required to unleash the auto-aiming cold snap. So the fact that they acknowledge that skill is going to be taken into account for future ability balancing sounds good to me. Something that is also really interesting is Bungie is looking into changing ability cooldowns. Kevin simply said that current ability cooldowns are just too fast. When you pair a good stat build with things like aspects, mods like Bomber and Outreach, and exotics, you can just spam abilities. He also said that when ability cooldowns get adjusted, they will probably do something about the effectiveness of those abilities as well. A common theme that kind of came out of this discussion is the eternal struggle between the power fantasy and the sandbox balance. Destiny is a sci-fi shooter with space magic, so it's important to have cool abilities and supers that define your role as a guardian. On the other hand, though, it's important to create subclasses that fit within the confines of the sandbox in order to avoid creating more broken things like pre-nerf Stasis. So the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, where subclasses maintain their power fantasy and identity, but remain in check so that we can have a variety of viable options in PvP. To give a couple examples, he said that Top Tree Dawnblade is way too strong right now, but Bottom Tree Golden Gun fits somewhere into that sweet spot. Something I think a lot of people need to recognize is that Bungie does play a lot of Destiny too. No pun intended. Chris Proctor, the other sandbox developer on the podcast, even said that he did over 200 Grandmaster Nightfalls last season. I feel like this may be partially due to the lack of frequent updates and communication, but it seems that a lot of players don't realize that Bungie employees experience the game just like we do. Kevin even straight up mentioned how he gets destroyed by Trials recoveries just like everyone else. The next topic was movement abilities and their current massive popularity. Things like Stompies, Icarus Dash, Transversive Steps, and Dune Marchers are at the very top of the meta. The Sandbox team believes that extreme mobility with no trade-offs is detrimental to the overall sandbox. Using these movement exotics and abilities provides massive benefits with little or no cost or risk involved, and that's why movement is basically meta. Honestly, I'm okay with making there be some sort of trade-off or nerf to movement abilities. Stuff like Icarus Dash really makes up for bad positioning and ultimately allows you to escape situations that you have no business surviving. Chris also clarified that nerfing movement definitely doesn't mean going back to year 1 levels of speed. They're just taking it down a notch. He gave adding cooldown to Shatter Dive as an example of this type of change. He also said that they're trying to look at movement abilities from the victim's point of view. I think that this is super important because ultimately the victim's point of view is what leads to frustration. Stasis is fine until you're on the receiving end of endless freeze spam, right? I feel like the prospect of nerfing movement tech is something that scares a lot of players. Movement is an integral part of Destiny PvP especially, and making it less effective could really change the pace of the game. However, I'm pretty sure that the tweaks we're talking about here are not going to be massive, game-breaking nerfs to movement. I think there's just going to be some cost associated with running a super agile build. This cost could be in the form of being forced to heavily focus your build towards movement and perhaps sacrifice something like ability or super regen speeds, for example. The next part is about special and primary weapon sandbox balance. Chris said that it's clear that special weapons are a bit too dominant in the current sandbox. Bungie wants to keep all special weapons able to one-shot with the exception of trace rifles to kind of preserve the power fantasy. Personally, I don't think grenade launchers should be able to deal massive AoE, go around corners, and one-shot kill. Chris explicitly said that he considers grenade launchers to be hard to use and require a lot of skill, and I strongly disagree with that statement. Maybe things like Fighting Lion are acceptable, but these new grenade launchers that are basically Mountain 2.0 are a pretty big pain point for the Crucible for many players. Bungie actually buffed special grenade launchers just last season, so I feel like there's definitely some disconnect going on here between the developer and the community. Getting back to the topic of special weapons though, it's clear that Bungie thinks they're generally overpowered. One of the recent TWABs actually mentioned how they're planning to nerf shotguns in the near future, and honestly, I'm pretty interested to see how that actually pans out. Shotguns have dominated the Crucible for quite a while now, so I wonder what they're actually going to do to bring them back in check. Also, I'm curious if the aforementioned nerfs to movement abilities and exotics will have a sizable impact on shotgun effectiveness, because it may make it harder to get in close range while wielding a shotgun. In relation to all of this, the special ammo economy was also mentioned. Right now you can run double scavengers on your boots, and that leads to picking up 3 special ammo shots at the very minimum per brick. Especially for weapons like shotguns, this means you can kinda just main your shotgun and never ever run out of ammo. I'm pretty sure this is going to be addressed down the road. As for primary weapons, the Sandbox team thinks that they're all pretty balanced with the exception of 120 RPM hand cannons. Chris mentioned how pulses and SMGs are in a good spot, but autos may be a little weak. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I think that primary weapons are in a good spot. We saw what happened with pre-nerf 120 RPM hand cannons. They were just so strong that nothing could counter them. I feel like trying to buff all primaries up to that level first of all would be super difficult to balance, but also not necessarily an adequate counter to special weapons. Quick swapping slug shotguns for maximum DPS and the quick draw glitch is also getting looked at. When weapons had pre-nerf quick draw anyway, it seemed that the glitch wasn't super necessary, at least from Bungie's point of view. But now that the quick draw perk got nerfed, Chris says they're looking into it. I've already seen tons of people freaking out about this, but please just chill. They didn't even confirm that they're changing anything, just that they're investigating. The quick draw nerf has been the topic of a lot of recent Twitter drama, with a lot of people saying that it just made players use their shotguns more and never switch to their primaries. However, Chris said that the nerf worked exactly as intended, which I found pretty interesting. Prior to the nerf, quick draw was the #1 weapon perk across literally every weapon type because that 100 handling speed was just pretty insane. After the nerf, its usage decreased by about 50%, which is apparently exactly what they wanted. Next up is snipers and how stats like aim assist actually work. I've gotten so many comments on my recent sniping videos where people seemingly have no idea what aim assist is or how it works in Destiny 2, so I'm actually considering making a video explaining how it really works in detail. There are also tons of people that think using a controller makes the bullets curve towards the head more than using mouse and keyboard, but they're actually the same. I've even had a few people tell me that aim assist doesn't work at all on mouse and keyboard, so let's clear that up. Chris confirmed that the aim assist stat in fact influences 2 things, the bullet bending towards the head and the reticle friction/adhesion. The aim assist stat increases the angle of your aim assist cone. Essentially, this means that the more aim assist you have, the further your reticle can be away from your target and still have the bullet bend towards the head. This is identical for M&K and controller. For controller users, the aim assist stat also changes reticle friction, which isn't present on M&K. This basically just means that the more aim assist you have, the larger the sticky area around your target will be. Flinch is another hot topic in the community these days. I've seen a lot of people annoyed by the amount that their weapons flinch, particularly their primary weapons. This was also brought up, but ultimately Chris said that there aren't any plans to drastically reduce flinch on any weapons. He said that if you get the first shot on your opponent, it's not fun if they're just able to turn around and shoot you through the flinch and win the gunfight. Ultimately, that is true. Whoever gets the first shot off in a primary duel usually wins because they're flinching their opponent. However, I think the issue that most people have with the primary flinch is the randomness that it creates. Say for example, you're in a hand cannon gunfight with someone and you have identical aiming skill. The victor of that gunfight is going to be determined by who randomly gets flinched more. They also touched on the fact that Destiny Flinch sometimes flinches you towards your target instead of away. Chris said that there's potential that they'll look into changing that. Moving on, there was some discussion about balancing M&K and controller input devices. Chris said that they honestly don't want M&K and controller players playing against each other because M&K has the advantage in most situations. As someone who plays controller on PC against mostly M&K players, I think I do just fine. I feel like controller players who really exploit the few situations where they have an advantage can definitely compete against M&K. That's what I do anyway. As for balancing the two devices though, apparently the goal is to make it so that both devices generally care about the same stats. Next, we learned a ton about really specific things like perks and stats, so I'm just going to run through these pretty fast. We got to learn about Zen Moment. This is a perk that says it increases stability, but it doesn't actually increase the stability stat. Chris explained that instead, it reduces the maximum deflection angle possible while firing the weapon. Essentially, it clamps how high your recoil can jump. Next, there was some super juicy stats about sniper rifles. We learned how the aim assist cone angles vary between 0.825 degrees at 0 aim assist and 1.375 degrees at 100 aim assist. On top of that, sniper zoom affects the aim assist. At 60 zoom, the cone angle is 20% wider, and at 35 zoom, the cone angle is reduced by 40%. If this just went way over your head, here's the simplified version. Larger cone angles are better. The more aim assist your sniper has, the larger cone angle it has. And the longer your zoom is, the larger the cone angle is. We also learned the same about hand cannons. 0 aim assist gives a 2.5 degree angle, and 100 aim assist gives a 3 degree angle. This is why hand cannons are so forgiving and the bullets curve so much. We also got some very cool information about the tunnel vision perk. It gives plus 20 aim assist and 20 accuracy, and also a small multiplier to aim assist and accuracy cone values. We also learned that heating up gives 15% accuracy per stack. Overall, I'm super grateful that Kevin and Chris decided to come on the podcast and discuss the sandbox. Huge shout out to all the creators who put these questions together, and thanks to the developers for giving such detailed answers. Transparency is something that we as a community love, so I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to see more of this type of thing in the future. Check out the video description for details. If you're looking for a new PvP build now that Stasis is nerfed, look no further than my Spectral Blades guide. It's definitely meta now, and this video explains everything you need to know in order to use it effectively in PvP. It's the top video on your screen now.